I've started the recording, and John, if you'll remind me when the guest list is filled out, I'll repeat that warning to comply with Washington's two-party consent law.
You got it.
I'm busily adding people, so it's working.
Hello, everyone. We will be starting in a few minutes. I'm Rebecca with WASEIA, and thank you so much to all of you who are here today. We have over 100 people signed up for this briefing, so we're really excited about this.
Rebecca, once you think everyone is going to jump on and signed on, you might repeat that the meeting is being recorded.
I will.
So we can be legal.
Absolutely. We want to be on the up and up for all the reasons.
Hey, Bill and Rebecca, it also, when I got on, it said the meeting was being recorded and before I joined, so that's good too.
Yeah, I saw that as well. Thanks, Helena. And I was just saying to all of you new folks who've hopped on, welcome. I'm Rebecca with WASEIA. We're so excited to have, there's over 100 people who have signed up for this event today. So that's very exciting. And we will wait a few minutes to get started. We are recording this event. I want to make sure everyone is aware of that, and asking people to please, who are not presenting, to please have your microphones on mute until the question and answer period at the end, and we will be holding questions till the end. But welcome. Maybe we'll wait there's lots of people hopping on, so we'll wait a few minutes after, wait till 12:03, I think, to start. And for those of you who are just hopping on, I just want to say welcome. I'm Rebecca with WASEIA, and we're going to get going in minutes. We're so glad that you all are here. This meeting is being recorded, and we'll get going in a few minutes. Please keep your microphones muted until the question and answer period at the end, and we will start soon. Thanks so much for joining. We're going to get started in just a few minutes. And just okay. I had just said we were going to start at 12:03, and it seems that we're getting some critical mass. So, let me just roll it again. Hi, I'm Rebecca. I'm the outreach director with the Washington Solar Energy Industries Association, here with several members of our team and board. Thank you all for being here today and for your interest in what's happening with rooftop solar in Washington State. We are going to have a great panel of presenters today telling us what happened during this last legislative session, and most importantly, our strategy and our messaging plans as we move forward for next year. We are going to start with Elena Nelson, who is the co-owner of Fire Mountain Solar. And she's going to give us a brief history of WASEIA and kind of solar at large in our state. Then it's going to be followed by Mason Rolfe, who is the president of Olympia Solar. And he is going to give us a breakdown of what happened this last session with community solar. And then again, really focused on how we're going to move forward. And then we will follow that up with Amy Carpenter, who is the CEO of Solterra, and she will talk to us about net metering. Again, what happened and where we're going and what our strategies are. And then we will wrap again with Elena Nelson, who is going to talk about the importance of WASEIA is a membership-based organization. This is all about people power today on this meeting, and we're going to talk about membership and the ways that we get involved in creating a robust space and climate and reality for solar in our state of Washington. So with that, I would like to turn it over to Elena Nelson, who is going to share some information about the history of WASEIA and solar in our state. Take it away, Elena.
Okay, can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, great. I'm not a Google Meet expert, so I want to make sure. Well, hi everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. Again, I'm Elena Nelson, and I am co-owner and business and administrative manager of Fire Mountain Solar, one of Washington's oldest solar installation companies. I'm also co-founder and former 6.5-year board member of Solar Installers of Washington, or SIW. I've been asked to give a brief history of solar in our state, which will include why and how SIW came to be and how we eventually became WASEIA. A little more than 2 decades ago, there really was no solar industry in Washington, but there were a few individuals who saw some needs and opportunity for alternative energy here in our state. Some of them focused on the product sector and went on to become industry-leading solar electronics manufacturers. Then in 2000, early 2001, 3 other early pioneers each founded their own solar installation companies, and the mainstream solar industry was born. At some point in those early years, the educational nonprofit Solar Washington was formed, not to be confused with Solar Installers of Washington, which it was quite often, and that its goal was to promote the adoption of solar through public education. Back then, grid-tie solar was just becoming a thing throughout the US. In Washington, people were asking if solar actually works here. There were solar tours of the few homes that had solar happening yearly, and after a while, a couple of times a year. And they drew a lot of interest from the public, and everyone knew that solar was really expensive. The only people going solar were people who did it because they felt it was the right thing to do, or because they needed power for a remote site. Conversations to develop and refine the processes and policies for interconnecting solar to the utility grid were just getting started. Many of them involved educating utilities and legislators because few knew anything about how solar and the grid could interact. The discussions were relatively easy because there was so little solar. The few systems installed each year created no infrastructure issues and didn't impact utility profits. Then in 2005, things really changed. It's too complex to explain here how it all came about, but a state-funded production incentive intended to encourage private investment in clean air energy by making solar more affordable was approved by our legislature. The other main goal of the incentive was to spur solar manufacturing in our state. In 2017, a second production incentive would be passed, adjusting the incentive to better reflect the current cost of solar. And in 2019, because the cost of solar had dropped significantly, causing interest in solar to skyrocket, the funds for the second production incentive were fully allocated and no further incentive was deemed necessary. So back to 2013, Washington was an unlikely solar success story because the sun doesn't shine here. And it caught the attention of a national solar leasing company. They entered the picture with an eye to receiving some of the generous production incentive, similar to how they had taken advantage of incentives in other states. Fortunately, their attention did not go unnoticed, and in that early spring, Deborah Hafner-Ratliff of South Sound Solar sent an email to all the solar contacts she could find, alerting them to this attempt to receive these incentives. This email chain would rally a small but passionate band of solar contractors and system owners who then converged on a meeting where the leasing company was attempting to convince the Department of Revenue that their lease system should be eligible for the incentive. In the end, our scrappy contingency of solar fans successfully argued that the legislature clearly intended the incentive was to go to the solar adopter and that companies were not eligible for it directly. It was this experience that made it clear solar was moving into new territory occupied by much bigger players with big money. Important decisions were being made that had significant implications for the future of our solar businesses, and we were not being included in those conversations. That's because there was no way for anyone to know who to talk to. Those revelations resulted in a new flurry of emails about a number of important issues on the horizon. Over time, only 6 individuals continued to engage. So the 6 of us decided we would stop bugging everyone else and continue the conversations between ourselves, then include the broader group when appropriate. As we considered what was next, it became very apparent that there was a lot to accomplish and that it was critical that solar installers be at the table for discussions about solar topics and consumer protection. Which is why in October 2013, the 6 of us founded and became the original board of directors for Solar Installers of Washington. And if you look at these pictures here, we all were much younger back then. We also contracted with an experienced lobbyist to help guide us through the often complex legislative process. For me, it's important for people to know that SIW was founded on two guiding principles. First, we're stronger together. If the industry thrives, then each of us has the opportunity for our business to thrive. We would create an environment where direct competitors could set aside the rivalry for the greater good. And I will tell you that Washington has the friendliest group of solar installers in the state. We compete for business on the streets, then get together for food and drink later as really good friends. And also, we were founded on collaboration. We had an unwavering commitment to being a reasonable voice at the table in increasingly challenging conversations. We were aware of the tense and often hostile relationship between the solar industry and utilities in other states, and how that adversarial climate had resulted in policies that effectively killed solar in some markets. We knew that utilities are important and powerful stakeholders, and that if we wanted solar to be included in the future of energy in Washington, we would have to do a lot of listening and a lot of bending. We pledged to act with the utmost integrity and to consider the interests of all involved, even when that was difficult to do. We would work to ensure the success of the solar industry and to protect solar consumers, and we would do it while collaborating with the other stakeholders. And I am very proud and impressed to say that all of the amazing people that have served and represented SIW and WASEIA over the years have also kept to these commitments. After announcing the founding of SIW, our numbers immediately grew to include the majority of mainstream solar contractors in Washington, and that was when the real work started. As we engaged in policy work, SIW became known as a respected group of industry experts, and we were sought out by utilities and legislators whenever solar was discussed. Membership initially was limited to solar contracting companies, so we could focus on the matters that directly impact our small businesses and our customers. But as time passed and the solar landscape became more diverse and complex, it became clear that Washington needed a broader industry association to represent and leverage the influence of additional stakeholders impacted by the strong demand for solar. In November 2019, SIW officially became the Washington Solar Energy Industries Association, a state chapter of the National Solar Energy Industries Association, or SEIA. Today, WASEIA has 44 member organizations and a number of committees that focus on the wide variety of topics impacting the solar industry. Over the past 9+ years, our relatively small group, when measured against the funding and influence of the state's 60 utilities, has accomplished things big and small. Many of the things we accomplished were impossible tasks, our David versus Goliath moments. So some of the highlights: we negotiated second production incentive, resulting in $110 million of state investment to create jobs and increase the use of clean energy in communities all over Washington. We passed legislation to increase the minimum required amount of net metering per utility to support continued adoption of rooftop solar by home and business owners. We passed a second sales tax exemption for solar. We contributed to improvements in electrical, fire, and building codes to make them more solar friendly. And we've worked to educate the public about less than ethical marketing and business practices used by some solar providers setting up shop in our state, and included strong and specific language in proposed legislation to protect consumers from those bad actors. Going forward, there is so much more work to be done. Right now, the most important and urgent work is addressing the future of net metering, without which rooftop solar would be dead. And Amy will tell you more about that in a bit.
All right. Thank you so much for that detailed history, Elena. I really appreciate that. And really shows, which is a core element of what we're trying to accomplish here, that when we work together, we can really get things done. And that is what we're trying to get ahead of with this meeting. I also just want to say that we are really committed to, for this coming year and beyond, creating opportunities for our members and allies to connect and engage. And this is what we hope to be the first of many educational online opportunities that we're going to provide regularly. We haven't figured out the exact schedule yet, but regularly for people to engage and participate in this process. So with that, I'd like to pass it off to Mason Rolfe, and he is going to talk with us about community solar.
Thank you so much, Rebecca. And it's really wonderful to see so many familiar faces here. Let me just line up some slides. So my name is Mason Rolfe. I organize a team at a nonprofit called Olympia Community Solar. I've also been a board member of WASEIA going on, I think this is now my second year. And yeah, so I'm talking to y'all today about community solar. And Washington has never had a real enabling community solar law, but my team and supporters have been working on proposals to create a law like that for the last 5 years now. So I'm going to introduce our organization, talk about some of the past efforts, and then where we ran into roadblocks this last session, and then finally steps moving forward. So to start off, I'd like to introduce our nonprofit, Olympia Community Solar. We have a mission to steward an equitable and accessible transition to clean energy. Mostly we develop projects and programs that will forward this mission. The photo here is a 82 unit multifamily affordable housing complex here in Olympia that we managed to put net metered solar on with the support of South Sound Solar. And we've done a lot of similar projects around town. So working with nonprofits to install solar on their low-income occupied rentals and supporting their tenants with reducing their energy burden, or organizing community members to collaboratively invest in solar arrays. We've been kind of pushing the limits on what net metering can do. And net metering is great. Rooftop solar is great for folks that can access it. And a lot of times when I'm talking to public, I'll use a little example of who can access rooftop solar. So if I'm talking to a crowd and ask them, raise your hand if you can, and keep your hand raised if you're a building owner, a lot of hands go down immediately. More than half of families in Washington are renters. And then keep your hand raised if you have a good condition roof. Keep your hand raised if you have good solar exposure. Right away, most of the industry professionals in the room know that maybe 1 out of 4 homes will meet these requirements. Finally, we need to acknowledge that tons and tons of Washingtonians live paycheck to paycheck and can't afford or finance solar. So those are some of the common barriers to solar, whether you're a renter or you live in a multi-metered building, whether you have an old or shaded roof, or you can't afford the upfront costs of solar. And this represents actually a vast majority of Americans and a majority of Washingtonians. With Washington's clean energy transition laws, we now know that we need 100% transition by 2045. And my big concern is without a solution to serve folks that aren't reached by net metering, that will leave many of those communities behind. So the good news is that there's a ready-made solution, a policy called virtual net metering, which will allow multiple dispersed customers to receive benefits from a single solar farm. And I really want to distinguish the difference here between net metering and virtual net metering. Net metering is on the customer side of the meter. It's behind the meter, whereas community solar is a production generator. It's connected directly to the grid and is not serving on-site load. And then at the point where it connects to the grid, you have a production meter tracking how much energy you generate. And then it's the utility's job to allocate the benefits of the array financially to the meters of everyone participating. So the solar array could be across town or even in a different town. But as long as the customers subscribe to it and their meter is connected to the project, they still receive benefits, just as if it were on their own roof. And I'm going to show a short video of how VNET works.
What is virtual net metering? You may have heard of solar net metering, But what is virtual net metering and how does it work? Virtual net metering allows you to take advantage of solar electricity that's not generated on your property. Thanks to this incentive, even if you don't have rooftop solar panels powering your home directly, you can receive credits on your electricity bill for solar electricity produced elsewhere. Given that not everyone can install solar on their own property, virtual net metering is a vital policy to provide greater access to solar throughout the country. One example of virtual net metering in action is community solar. When a community solar farm generates electricity, that solar energy isn't used on site. Rather, solar credits are virtually sent to customers who buy into or subscribe to the community solar program. These credits appear directly on each customer's electricity bills, helping to reduce the amount they owe each month. Virtual net metering applies to more than just community solar. If you have a rooftop solar panel system that generates more electricity than you need, you can use virtual net metering to send your extra credits to another electricity customer. However, depending on your state and utility company, you may only be able to send these credits to people who live close by or in the same utility territory. Virtual net metering can also be useful if you want to install a solar panel system on a multifamily property, because it allows you to divide solar net metering credits between multiple people living in separate units in the same building. Unfortunately, virtual net metering is not available in every state. Governments need to pass proper legislation.
Yeah, so there's some very key aspects to VNEM that I want to point out. There's a single solar project, a production generator connected to the grid. There's multiple customers receiving benefits on their electric bill. And then a bonus, which isn't required, but is definitely a feature in my mind, is tangible economic savings resulting from the project. So customers who subscribe should not be paying a premium. Okay, so let's show Oregon, for example. Oregon has an active program. Their legislation was passed back in, I think, 2018. So you go to oregoncsp.org and you can see a list of available community solar projects. You'd find one in your utility service territory. So say you live in Portland, you're looking for Portland General Electric, and you click on one of these systems. And the next thing that comes up is the terms of subscription. So say I'm a residential customer, I can look and say, oh, if I sign up for this project, I'll receive 9.7 cents per kilowatt hour, and that'll cost me 9.2 cents per kilowatt hour. So the resulting savings will be about $39 a year. Not crazy, but definitely tangible economic benefit. And I will say, like, compared to the retail rate in Oregon, these are very close to the retail rate. But the real key here is the difference between the cost and the benefit of the bill credit. So it does cost less to sign up than you benefit. And another thing I want to point out here is their low income feature of their program provides low income customers a much lower subscription cost so they can benefit more. Now, Washington has had some incentive programs in the past. We had both versions of the production incentive program, which included quote unquote community solar, and it resulted in about 1.3 megawatts of new quote unquote community solar. And I put community solar in quotes here is because neither of those programs included a bill crediting mechanism. Some utility programs voluntarily offered their customers bill credits, but any other third party had no other reimbursement mechanism except the incentive program. So while the incentive supported community solar, there's really not a path forward past the incentive. And so here's a quote from the WSU report. Neither type, whether it's utility or third party, has a model beyond incentive. And another quote I'd love to share with y'all from the Institute for Local Self-Reliance is that McKinsey was talking about the new WSU fund for low-income community solar, saying the restored incentive is better than nothing, but by relying on state funds, the state of Washington has yet to develop a robust community solar market. And specifically what I think McKinsey is referring to here is the lack of a bill crediting mechanism. So I want to compare this to net metering. So in Washington, if you can access net metering, it's available to any customer. Customers get retail rate credits for any exported energy. They have the freedom to choose which provider they go with or what equipment they install, and they have the ability to own their projects. Compared to virtual net metering, which is right now, it's only available to voluntary utility programs. There's no credit rate standard, so each utility comes up with their own. There's limited or no choices of which projects or systems you go with. You pretty much have to go with the utility program. And then most utility programs do not offer customer ownership options. So it's definitely a different market than what net metering is currently facing. And it really is a testament to the net metering law here in the state that we have those benefits for residential solar customers. So the result of our lack of policy is that our state has continued to fall behind the industry leaders with community solar. So states like Minnesota, Massachusetts, New York have seen explosive growth, nearing almost a gigawatt of community solar in each state, compared to, you might be able to see the very thin blue line down at the bottom is Washington's community solar capacity, which I think in the last 2 years or so has gained up to about 10 megawatts, but still pretty slow. So let's try to fix that. Talking about community solar for Washington. So since the 2019 legislative session, our team has been proposing policies to try to fix this issue and enable virtual net metering. Let's see. I'm just going to skip forward to 2023 because that's what matters. So in 2023, we worked on House Bill 1509. The proposed bill would require utilities to interconnect and provide bill crediting to community solar projects. There's some rules around how large projects could be and how many customers had to be involved with them, but overall, that's the real key point. It established a bill credit value, and we propose using our customers' retail rate, same as net metering. And two reasons for proposing retail rate. One, we don't know what the quote unquote right rate would be until a full rate making procedure has happened. And in other markets, that's taken multiple years to do. So we wanted to put in a placeholder rate so that a successor rate could be developed. And two, residential customers have enjoyed retail rate credits from net meter projects for years, and saying you get a different rate just because you live in a different type of housing didn't feel right to us. We also included in the program net crediting to try to improve the customer experience. Net crediting allows the utility to collect subscription fees on the electric bill on behalf of the community solar provider. So a customer could see the cost and the benefit from their subscription directly on their electric bill. This improves the customer experience, prevents them from receiving multiple different bills for energy from different organizations. And finally, we set rules for the operation of projects and protections for subscribers. So pretty immediately, we met opposition in committee. We heard from utilities that they testified in opposition, but did not offer any written policy feedback or proposed edits. And I'm going to share a link to the committee hearing video. So if y'all would like to hear the utility testimony, it's really the only time during the session we heard from them. And then we did hear from the governor's office. Anna Leasing provided an extremely edited redline version of our proposal, and pretty much indicated that the original proposal was a non-starter, I think mostly because of the retail rate proposal. But the redline was very untenable. It would have limited all community solar to only low-income customers. It would have removed net crediting. It would have removed all of our community consumer protection measures. It was not great, to say the least. So we did a bunch of work in the week or two that we had. We met with the state stakeholders. We identified a bunch of pieces in their feedback that were really good feedback, and we incorporated those into our proposal, submitted that amendment to the legislature. Unfortunately, when it came down to committee movement, the governor's office doubled down on their opposition to even the amendment that included many of their feedback points. And in addition to the governor's office, I think Representative Fye presented a challenge to the proposal. So with those two big pieces of opposition, it failed to pass committee. So looking forward, and I'll paste those links when I'm done. Looking forward, our team is organizing a small committee to work on policy language over the interim. And if you're particularly interested in the language of policy, let me know, and I'm happy to try to include people in that group. And then we're also going to be working on legislator and regulator education, because a bunch of the feedback we received was very much not based in the same community solar reality that I've been living in. So those were our two big lessons learned, that one, we have some policy improvements to make, and two, we need to do more education work. So with that, our plan is to propose an amended version of the bill next year and work together to empower more Washington communities with clean energy. A few ways you can help are joining in with WASEIA, asking your legislator and your associates to support community solar. When we actually get into the next legislative session, to show up and provide testimony and support, or even sign in and support, written support, anything. And finally, learn more about the issue. And here are some important links for doing so. WASEIA will have an action network with notifications going out, and then our team at Oli Solar has our own action network. Here's our contact information. I'm happy to answer questions. My email address is just our website with Mason at in front of it. So that's how you reach me. And I will stop there.
Rebecca, you're muted.
Thank you. I just wanted to say thank you so much, Mason, and thank you for plugging the Action Center, because we will be continuing to encourage people to sign up and get involved. But let's pass it off now to our next presenter. Amy Carpenter from Solterra is going to talk to us about net metering.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So my name is Amy. I'm the CEO of Solterra Solar. I started in the industry in 2009 as a solar designer, and have worked my way up to actually getting to run a company and have influence at a higher level. And solar is something I am super jazzed about and super passionate about, and I'm really excited to have an audience here today. So let me start presenting. You guys should see my screen, I hope. Someone give me a thumbs up. Awesome. All right. Before I even get started, I just want to say, Mason, thank you for that run through. I get super excited about the concept of community solar. Mason alluded to it, of course, but there's more than one way to accomplish our goals of, empowering consumers in our state to support solar. Net metering is a super important part of it. It's not the only solution, and it's not going to get us all the way there. So really excited to have heard his presentation and have that on all of our radar. So let me get started. First of all, just want to go through what is net metering. So most people on this call are solar folks. I'm sure most of you know what net metering is, but just as kind of a quick recap, net metering allows any homeowner or business owner who has solar to not only continue to buy power from the utility like they always have, but to also be able to send any excess energy that they have on a really down to the minute basis, but on a daily basis, sending any excess kilowatt hours back onto the grid. And those credits are actually going to go to one of their immediate neighbors. So what's really cool about net metering that I don't think everyone really thinks about all the time is that anytime a customer has solar and is using this net metering policy, they become a local green power source in their neighborhood or in their community. And that really matters when we think about how our traditional grid infrastructure is set up. We have 3 main regions across the country: West, East, and Texas. And those utilities buy and sell power across state lines. Our kilowatt hours travel massive distances. And, rough estimates show that we are losing anywhere from 25 to over 50% of energy in those transmission losses alone. So anyone who's putting a distributed electricity resource on their roof and sending excess credits right into their neighborhood, their environmental impact and really their financial impact of generating that power is kind of a 2-to-1. If we have to generate, 2 kilowatt hours at a power source thousands of miles away versus one right on a roof, one of those is more efficient than the other. So this policy is great in just supporting that distributed energy distribution. And it really matters from a customer standpoint if they are deciding to buy solar from a cash flow perspective. If I'm a homeowner, I'm putting solar on my roof, and in our awesome summer months, which is one of the best kept secrets about the state of Washington, or at least the western half of it, we have really long summer days. We generate a ton of solar, and a lot of times we have excess credits in those months. Net metering allows solar customers to carry those credits forward to winter months and be able to help offset their electricity costs year round. And then it also matters on that societal level, like I was saying, if you're sending excess credits back to the grid in the middle of the day when society needs it most, that impact is not only beneficial to the individual homeowner, but also to the community at large. And then if we look at just the history of net metering, Elena did a great job of referencing this. We had some really early pioneers in our state around solar, and actually our very first net metering legislature occurred in 1998, and it was to allow first come first serve customers to net meter up to 0.1% of 1996 utility peak demand. For anyone who's not a super math whiz in this group, that is not a lot. So over time, improved that through the efforts of many different organizations. But in 2019, we really did experience a huge win for net metering, where we increased the threshold to 4% of that same 1996 utility peak demand, and also changed the reset, the annual reset of credits to March 31st. So what does that mean? In the state of Washington, net metering is designed to not allow people to become a competitor of the utility directly. The policy is written in such that you need to offset roughly a max of 100% of your annual usage, so that you're not having a bunch of extra credits owed to you from the utility. And to prevent that from a policy standpoint, those credits that are banked do reset to 0 once per year. So the 4% is relevant because once we hit 4% of utility peak demand, the utilities could, in theory, change how they're going to approach net metering and no longer offer access to new homeowners or businesses to net metering policy. So in 2023, the goal was to introduce a bill that would increase that threshold and also address a couple of other key issues. Now, what happened is, well, we are here because it didn't pass. So foreshadowing, we know it didn't pass, but I want to talk a little bit about what was in the bill first. So the first point for the House Bill 1427 was to raise that threshold of 4% up to 12% or until 2035, whichever came sooner. What that effectively was going to do was triple the available net metering credits available to our state. It also was going to increase the size of eligible solar projects to allow for a larger net metering cap. It used to be capped to 100 kilowatts, and they wanted to expand low-income energy assistance programs using those surplus net metering credits. So it was a way to attempt to, make this bill a little bit more equitable, which layered with community solar would have had a massive impact on our state. And we also wanted to, in that bill, put together a diverse and representative stakeholder group to determine the long-term future of net metering. It's not a realistic plan to just indefinitely keep raising the cap for utilities to need to net meter. But where our hope was with this bill of tripling the available access, and then also long-term really getting a group of key stakeholders together to come up with a solution would be a great outcome for our industry and for anyone hoping to interact with solar. Now, why it didn't pass, very similar to what Mason shared, there was some strong opposition to the bill. The details were that on February 9th, the Environment and Energy Committee did pass this bill out of committee with a bipartisan vote of 12-3. After that, it got stuck on the House floor. Utilities and other opposition leaned very heavily into a cost shifting argument, which in layman's terms just means that it was an argument that only rich people were going to get to have solar, and it was going to push costs to lower income or renters or homes that weren't going to have solar available to them. And while that was scary sounding in theory, there was a ton of peer-reviewed data provided by our organization and others to say otherwise, that cost shifts are immeasurable or equally likely to be of grid benefit at the level we're at with solar in our state. Those cost shift studies showed that really you start to see an impact in a negative way once you hit 40% of peak power. And as a reminder, we're talking about 4% here, and we are still below that 4%. So it was sort of one of those, let's throw this number out here, but it's really not, or throw this argument out there, but it's really not something that's pretty impactful yet. It's also important to understand, and I referenced this before, that the policy is not incentivizing oversizing a system, but rather just to maximize a homeowner's or a business's roof to get to a net zero concept. And the benefit of that, when you think about this from a grid perspective, is that what homeowners and businesses are really do is just minimizing their impact on the grid. If they're offsetting their own power source, it leaves resources available from power generation and grid infrastructure available to everyone else that's interacting with the grid, and prolongs the need to do very expensive, very costly grid infrastructure upgrades to support higher power flow through the grid. So while this bill did not pass, there's a huge opportunity to organize this next session and make sure that we do get good policy passed in our state. Why does this matter? At the most basic level, I've been asked a ton of times, how are we running successful solar businesses, or how are we spurring solar adoption in Washington state? And really the shortest answer to that is that Washington has good solar policy. And people with this policy are supporting a number of different things. We have a lot of living wage jobs in Washington state. Currently, the number is sitting at about 4,000 individuals that are working and supporting their families and their own livelihoods through this industry. The amount of solar deployed in Washington is 585 megawatts approximately, which is the equivalent of powering about 58,000 homes. And we have 148 companies represented in our Washington state industry, which includes 62 installers and developers, 30 manufacturers, and a number of other types of solar companies. And the other key point to mention that why this matters is that when we have good policy, it drives adoption. The more people that adopt solar, the higher the demand is for solar products across the globe. And the more people that are purchasing those products, the lower costs are going to go for those solar products. We actually have data that shows prices have dropped over 50% to do solar in the last 10 years. So good policy is actually going to make solar more accessible to more people by making the pricing a lot more attractive compared to the cost of doing nothing. Good policy also matters immensely just to hold people accountable. If you look at the utilities in our state, Elena already mentioned this, we have a number of utilities. There's a couple of large stakeholders that were a prominent part of opposing this policy. And those are privately held utilities that are accountable to shareholders. And with anything in life, if profit is going to be a priority, it will continue to be a priority unless policy dictates otherwise. So good policy is going to not only help keep this industry alive and thriving, but also hold utilities accountable to continuing to support our clean energy goals in our state. So what's next? 2024 session is super mission critical for us to continue to see solar thriving in our state. There are a number of utilities that are pushing closer to those 4% thresholds. And if we do reach a place where policy lapses before we have new policy in place, that is terribly damaging to the momentum that we have spent the last 15 years in our state, 15 plus years in our state, creating. It will also result in a lot of jobs lost and small businesses potentially not being able to sustain their momentum in the state. So there's just a ton of reasons why this next session really needs to be the season that we prevail at getting good policy passed. Yeah, so that's kind of what's next. This is the very beginning of our organizing, grassroots organizing, and it's super encouraging to me to see how many people are on this call today. So as kind of a close, instead of taking the call to action myself, I'm going to hand it off to Elena to really talk about how you can join us in this fight of organizing and getting great policy for our state in 2024 and beyond.
Thanks, Amy. And that was really a great summary of a very complex topic. Net metering is hugely important and has been an issue in other states. And so, yeah, we know it's a big deal right now. So rooftop solar has firmly and rightfully established itself as an excellent investment and as a key part of us meeting our clean energy goals and providing power to communities all over Washington. And it makes these policy conversations more important and urgent than ever. As I'm sure you all know, it's like as an industry becomes more successful and everything, we start pushing up against other industries and other needs and things. And so it's really, really important that WASEIA has some backing from the public to get our voices heard, because even with all that we've accomplished and everything, the utilities still are much louder than we are, and they have a lot more influence than we do. And ultimately, we need to be able to work with them and around them as needed to get some things done that need to be done, because they're not going anywhere and neither are we. So the good news is pretty much everybody but the utilities loves rooftop solar. It reduces the cost of living. As I mentioned, it helps with climate change. It reduces the burden of power production and transmission on the grid, like Amy mentioned, and it gives people more energy independence. So what's not to love? We need you and as many solar lovers as possible to help us in this next session, because despite the broad support and all the third-party data that we came to the table with, as Amy said, the utilities were effective at drowning us out and making people believe things, myths that have been spread nationwide. So here's what we need. Sign up for, or how you can help. So sign up for news and action alerts. There will be links in the chat, and then also I believe that Rebecca is going to be emailing this out to all of the attendees. And that'll help you keep up to date on the various things that are happening. This session is a really critical time for us to be talking with our legislators and everything, because once session happens, things move so quickly, and it is a short session next year. Equally important is become a member of WASEIA. We now have individual memberships that are only $50 a year, and that may not seem like much, and it's not at a certain level, but if we can get as many people as possible to join, those funds will help us continue the outreach that we need to do, and will help us develop some new ways to be getting our message heard by the people that need to. And if you're in the solar industry of some way, business memberships are also available, so you can check that out. And then help us spread the word. So share with all of your network, because the more people that are speaking up, the the better. And the public has to let the legislators know that we want strong and well-crafted policies that support the inclusion of solar in our energy future. Otherwise, Washington may end up like other states where policies crafted by utilities have effectively squashed solar. So, Caitlin, the new president of WASEIA, had something she wanted to say.
Thank you, Elena. Yeah, I just wanted to let folks know for the donation button that Rebecca put into the chat here, anyone who is going to be donating $50 or more today, we are going to be launching our individual membership in the near future, and we'll consider you an early adopter. So it's anyone that doesn't work for a solar company, anyone not in the industry, technically, as an employee, will be an early adopter as an individual member, and will have access to a limited edition WASEIA swag run that we're putting together that only you will get. Just putting that out there for today. So it's $50 or more. We'll get you access as an early adopter individual membership.
All right. Thank you, Caitlin. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, everyone, for being here. I know that there's some questions out there, and I want to, we've got just a few minutes left, get an opportunity. Aurora, you asked a question for virtual NEM community solar. Are we considering the impact of third-party billing to tenants? I guess that is directed to you, Mason.
Yeah, could I ask Aurora if you're willing to jump on and provide a little more information on your question?
Yeah, so I currently work, I live in Bellingham and have for the last 2 years. Big fan of the Washington solar industry. That's why I came up. But I work for a national company. I work for SunPower, and I work on the multifamily program, mostly in California. We'd love to expand to other states. We already engaged in the VNEM program in California, and all the IOUs and a number of municipally run utilities. And so one of the things we're finding attracts a lot of multifamily developers into adopting VNEM is the opportunity to hire a third-party billing partner that will then basically combine the utility bill and the solar bill into one bill to the customer. They'll pay the utility bill, and the customer, the resident, will pay less overall for the total solar bill, but it'll create an operating income for the property owner. So it becomes this, it becomes really interesting to people who own multifamily properties to get solar on the building because it's another stream of revenue on top of the rent.
That's amazing. I'd love to talk with you about ways to incentivize landlords to install solar. So maybe we could connect after this.
Yeah, of course. I put my personal email in the chat. I'd love to connect.
Great.
Yeah, I've grabbed that as well, and I know Mason's is in there as well. Any other questions for our panel? Please raise your hand. All right. Well, you guys must have done such a good job. Anyone? All right. Well, again, thank you all for being here. The most important takeaway from all of this, I'm sure you see that we have a theme, is please sign up. We are going to be starting having a somewhat regular newsletter and updates, and we're going to keep you posted, let you know how to get involved, continue to provide educational opportunities like this presentation today to make sure that you are up to speed and informed and are able to share this information with your community so that we can really make a difference. As Amy said really eloquently, this is the time. And we had some challenges last year, but what we have in our corner and what is our greatest strength is this incredible community of people. We have people who are benefiting from solar. We have so many educated people in this state, and we just need to share our stories and spread the word and make sure that A, the proper information is out there, and B, that our elected officials understand how important this issue is to the people of Washington, and of course to our efforts to create a clean energy grid for our state and green jobs for our state and our country. And now is the time. I'm just thinking, and this is a little impromptu, but we have just a few minutes left. And James, I see that you are on here. Do you have anything to add, being that you have just gotten out of being in the midst of session.
Oh my gosh. Well, thank you, Rebecca. Everybody who's spoken so far has done an awesome job and really nailed the details of what happened. I just mentioned that the utilities, they do have an army of lobbyists they employ to influence legislators and the governor's office. And so they were able to kind of divide and conquer. Divide, I mean pick apart our bill, one by one, and raise concerns, and focus the debate on the impact of cost shifting. So we were playing a bit of defense in that there were a lot of new legislators who were unfamiliar and not well educated on the policy of net metering. They don't know the difference between peak power and the fuel mix, all those kinds of things. But I would just encourage folks, like Caitlin and everyone has said, to volunteer where you can, and also foster a relationship with your local legislator. Sit down with them for coffee and talk about your business and your living and the impact you're making on clean energy and climate change and all of that, and help foster that relationship so when the time comes, they can help us sponsor our bill and be there for us with the vote when the time comes. So that would be just a huge help for us in Olympia.
Thank you. And as Caitlin had said, I think it was Caitlin, I will be following up and emailing all the folks on this call. We will be asking to please share your legislative district, because we want to play a role in helping we can help coordinate, we can help bring people together and help get folks talking to their legislators. We're here as a resource and support for the really important community. James, go ahead.
Sorry, that was a mistake. I was just hitting buttons here. I'm actually on my way driving back from Olympia for a bill signing. So,
all right. Well, again, thank you so much for all your work this session. Anybody else? We got just a couple minutes left. Who's excited? All right. Yeah, there we go. There's like a virtual grassroots party going on. All right. Well, thank you again, everyone, for being here. We are so thrilled that, for our very first effort that we put together quite quickly, that we got such a large turnout, and I will be following up, and we look forward to working with you to share the story and create a healthy, robust rooftop solar industry in our state of Washington. And with that, it is 12:59. I think we are ready to go. Oh, Rich, go ahead. I think your mic is up.
That was a mistake. Sorry.
Oh, okay.
I'm clapping hands over here. That's all.
All right. Well, that's great. So again, thank you all so much for being here. Really appreciate it. We will be in touch. Please let me know if you any questions. My contact information is also in the chat, and look forward to working with y'all.
Thanks, everyone.
And
bye. Have a good day. Thank you.
Thank you, Paige. All right, everyone, have a wonderful day.